Corey.
Mm,
Corey, get up. It's time to do a review.
mm.
Come on.
I'll do it next week.
You said that 2 months ago.
Nothing good came out.
Bullshit. You've been talking about Godzilla for a year.
Besides that.
X-Men?
Besides that.
You're just making excuses.
I know.
If you keep doing these, you might be able to afford things other than porn.
Godzilla first stomped onto the scene in 1954 by Japanese production company Toho. It did well financially, but received mixed reviews from the Japanese media. Over time, it became recognized as an important film in Japan. Godzilla became a cultural icon, spawning tons of sequels. Godzilla crossed over to recognition in America in 1956 when the original film was dubbed and re-edited for American audiences. This edited version is now known as sort of a dumbed-down version of the original, but at the time it was a big success. Even though Japan continued to crank out Godzilla films over the next several decades, with many of them seeing American releases, it wasn't until 1998 that we actually took our first stab at making a Godzilla film ourselves. This film was directed by Roland Emmerich, hot off the success of Independence Day. Unfortunately, it was universally hated, largely because it was only a Godzilla film in name, with the monster bearing little resemblance to the Big G in appearance and characteristics. It was also hated by the Japanese. Plans for a franchise were scrapped, and Toho became more cautious about handing over the rights to their beloved character. But in 2010, Legendary Pictures obtained the rights from Toho, and they and Warner Bros. Have teamed up to give it another shot. How'd they do this time? It's not perfect, but when it comes to the things that Godzilla film needs to get right, it totally nails it. Let me make a note here. I'm not really that familiar with the whole Godzilla mythology or whatever. I did see a few of the films when I was young, including the original, but that was so long ago I can't remember much. I do know most of the Godzilla trademarks though, and they are all present here. But there's one thing you have to know about this film. Godzilla is not actually in it very much. And I know that probably sounds stupid, making a movie called Godzilla with little Godzilla, but think of it like Jaws, where the shark doesn't show up for the majority of the movie, but the build-up is incredible, and it makes the scenes with said shark that much more potent. I'm not putting Godzilla on the same level as Jaws, but I think it does manage to achieve a similar effect. It builds up to Godzilla pretty well, and when he's revealed for the first time, it's awesome. And there's several moments where it looks like we're going to get some action, only for the movie to cut away. And I do think they did that a little too much, even I was getting a bit frustrated, but it completely pays off in the end when it finally lets loose. Godzilla can't talk, of course, so the movie needs people to advance the story. This is where the movie's flaws are most apparent. I'd say the script is solid, but it's not so great that you could remove Godzilla completely and still have a compelling movie. It borders on corny from time to time, and some of the characters aren't given much of anything to do. But they've assembled a hell of a cast, and I think they're good enough to make it work. The lead actor is Aaron Taylor Johnson, best known for playing Kick-Ass. He's fine. He can be kinda dull, but I don't know if that's really his fault or the script's. Ken Watanabe has the second most screen time, and he's pretty memorable. He's charismatic, and he has some of the best lines. It's kind of amusing how he's become the go-to guy for every Japanese role in Hollywood, but he's consistently good, so I'm not complaining. A lot of people are excited for this because of Bryan Cranston. I would not recommend seeing this movie solely for him because he's not in it all that much, but for what it's worth, he probably gives the best performance. He's more than just Walter White, he's a hell of an actor. Even the smaller roles are filled by great actors. Elizabeth Olsen, Juliette Binoche, Sally Hawkins, and David Strathairn all appear. They don't have a lot to do, but they make the most of what they have. The director on this was Gareth Edwards, a big Godzilla fan himself. He, to put it bluntly, directed the shit out of it. Even if some people are going to hate the humans and the lack of Godzilla, the movie is extraordinary on a technical level. The effects are great, the action scenes are exciting and thrilling, and there's a number of suspenseful moments, and not to mention the gorgeous cinematography by Seamus McGarvey. It's all very atmospheric, which I like. When things get destroyed, it feels significant. This isn't Transformers where things explode for 2 hours and it loses all meaning. As you can tell, I really like this movie, but I know a lot of people got really fucking pissed about the lack of Godzilla. I don't know, maybe it's because I expected that going in, or I'm just more patient, but even though there were times when I wanted them to show Godzilla more, I could see what they were going for when I look at the movie as a whole. And I think it's better to leave your audience wanting more. Plus, this was how a lot of the old films were. So bottom line, I think it's one of the best blockbusters in recent memory. Go in knowing not to expect the Godzilla Variety Hour, and I think you'll enjoy it. You get a bonus. Another review. Yay! It just so happened my two most anticipated movies this summer came out back to back. So here's X-Men Days of Future Past, the latest installment in the long-running franchise. To recap the series to this point, X-Men kicked off the franchise all the way back in 2000. Coming at a time when comic book movies were dormant, it was a big success and launched many more comic book films. It's a good movie, but a lot of people consider it pretty dated. X2 came next and was vastly superior. Bringing in more characters, bigger production values, and increasing the scope, it's a damn good movie. I actually rewatched it just recently and I think it still holds up. It's the best in the series and one of the better superhero movies. The first two movies were directed by Bryan Singer, and he was expected to return for the third, but he bolted and instead made Superman Returns. To replace him, Matthew Vaughn was hired, and he came up with a number of ideas for the film, but he ended up leaving as well. At the last minute, Fox brought in the king of mediocrity, Brett Ratner. The result was X-Men The Last Stand, which was not very good. It wasn't terrible, but it was a mess and very disjointed. What should have been an epic finale to the series was a set of disappointment. After that came X-Men Origins Wolverine. It sucked. Next, the series took an unexpected turn by making the prequel X-Men First Class, focusing mainly on Professor X and Magneto when they were younger. Matthew Vaughn came on for real this time, and armed with a strong cast, found success. The biggest debate seems to be between this one and X2 for best in the series. I definitely think X2 is superior. First Class has a lot of good stuff, but a number of glaring flaws as well. There's some cringeworthy dialogue, poor effects, and many characters that leave no impact. But overall, it's a fine film that revitalized interest in the franchise after two failures. For some reason, we got another Wolverine spin-off simply titled The Wolverine, which took place in Japan. This one is definitely better than Origins, but it's pretty forgettable. Now we have Days of Future Past, which brings it all together. Taking place years after The Last Stand, the X-Men are being hunted by robots called Sentinels. These machines are able to identify mutants and also adapt to their powers, making them basically unbeatable. They were originally created to terminate mutants, but they began hunting humans as well. Now there's only a handful of mutants left, and they are no match. The mutant Kitty Pryde has the ability to send someone's consciousness back in time. With no other options, Professor X comes up with a crazy idea: send someone back to 1973 to prevent the Sentinels from being created. By default, the one sent back has to be Wolverine, since with his healing power, he's the only one whose mind will be able to handle being sent that far back. So by using time travel, this movie combines the original cast with the cast of First Class, and it's based on one of the most famous stories from the comics, so this should be the ultimate X-Men movie. And while I need to see it again to be sure, I think it is. It's the biggest in scale, and it feels like anything could happen, especially when time travel can affect the future so drastically. Hell, Wolverine could go back and make things even worse. Not everyone returns from the previous movies, but many of them do, and they're all great. Truth be told, I'm getting a little sick of Wolverine being the star, but Hugh Jackman still plays him perfectly. This film utilizes Wolverine well by not making it about him, but rather having him advance the story of the other characters. Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen return as the future Professor X and Magneto respectively, while their younger selves are played by James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender. I thought while watching First Class that the younger iterations of the characters don't resemble the elder ones, both in looks and mannerisms, and I wondered if that would be distracting when you actually brought them together. But fortunately, they fit better than I thought, and honestly, when the actors are that good, who even cares? America's current sweetheart, Jennifer Lawrence, appears as Mystique, who was a vital part of the Sentinels' creation. She's sort of playing the older Rebecca Romijn Mystique this time, meaning she doesn't emote much. But as always, she's ridiculously likable. I think they can make a movie where she just stares at the camera for 2 hours, and I would declare it a masterpiece. There's also some newcomers to the future X-Men. They aren't well established, but their action scenes are a highlight. The main human antagonist is Bolivar Trask, creator of the Sentinels in 1973. He's played by Peter Dinklage, who's blown up from his hugely popular role in Game of Thrones. And I have to give the filmmakers credit. Dinklage is a dwarf, and from what I understand, Trask in the comics was not. So not only did they give them the role in spite of that, his height is never even brought up once in the film. I was expecting someone to make a crack about his height or for it to be a motivation in his work, but it never came up. Props for that. When you make a story with time travel, you run the risk of making it convoluted. But here it's pretty simple. There's the past and the future. It does alternate back and forth sometimes, but it's pretty obvious what you're looking at just from the visuals. Bryan Singer returns to the franchise for the first time since X2. I think this film shows that he's been the heart of the series this whole time. He's done a couple stinkers, but overall he's a damn good director. He's great at staging action and handling big ensemble casts like this one. My complaints are pretty nitpicky. As a non-comic reader, I didn't understand how Kitty was able to send people back in time. It was never mentioned before, and it doesn't seem to be in line with her phasing ability. I also wish some of the X-Men had more to do, but this is understandable, as giving substantial time to everyone would blow up the movie. I'm just glad they appeared at all. There's a number of continuity errors, and I managed they just decided to retcon some things, but it's not clear what is and is not canon anymore. This probably should be a bigger deal, but the continuity had become such a mess that I didn't care. So fans of the series should find plenty to enjoy here, and I think it's even accessible to people who haven't seen the other films. The plot is explained well enough, and the hardest part will be knowing who everyone is, but I think throughout the movie, you'll get the gist of it. Thanks for watching. I'll try to be less lazy and crank another one of these out before the end of the year, so see you next time.